Okay, you guys, we need to have a conversation about money. Why money? Because spiritual people are often pretty stingy with money. Okay, look, DK says it himself in the works that that esotericists and mystical types tend to come from too high a place sometimes, so they can have a difficult time getting things off the ground. Now, this is a good topic to follow my recent Jupiter in Cancer video, because the seventh ray, which is a dominant ray through the arms of the cardinal cross, Aries seventh ray, Cancer seventh ray, Libra's third ray, but then you've got Uranus, esoteric ruler, seventh ray planet. And then, of course, you have Capricorn, rays 1, 3, 7. Manifestation, practicality, making things happen. Money is associated with the seventh ray. Third ray as well. But in the third ray instance, it's a little bit more marketing, management of resources, putting things together, systems that help flow resources and money and financing efficiency, right? The rate of matter. And the seventh ray is different. There's a similarity, of course, but the difference is that it's a little bit more of the ray of the philanthropist. It is the ray of financing, investors. So the business manager or the marketing expert, a little bit more of the third ray. And yeah, the wealthy financier, a little bit more of that seventh ray. And there we have the magic quality of the seventh ray. Practical magic, ceremonial order and magic. And then we've got sex magic as well as the interplay of the opposites. And the master of the seventh ray was said to be able to manifest diamonds at will. Now, that's not a third ray process, because the third ray process still works within the sphere of the adaptable intelligence of substance. The seventh ray has that flavor of the first ray in it. And so there's this bringing together of the opposing forces that can bypass, if you like, some of the certain illusions that come through the third ray of manifestation. Saturn is a third ray planet, and remember when we talk about the initiate moving out of the fixed to the cardinal cross, that's where Saturn cannot follow men onto the cardinal cross, because at that point the revelation of the spirit has been really anchored in, and then we've got this kind of dynamic magical creativity that becomes possible at this stage. So it's important to talk about money because we're moving into a seventh ray age. And money, business, the entrepreneurial spirit, we already see this as part of the incoming Aquarian age, particularly with the growth of the internet and this ability for it's a very seventh ray Uranian quality. This is the technological element. It enables us to bypass certain processes of substance, right? You can get an online website and work from home, and whereas before you'd have to go to the place and build the shop and do all of these different things. There's certain bypassing. There's still universal principles that you have to work with, of course, but in a way there's a kind of bypassing of certain laws of materiality that human beings were once bound to. So this theme of money, of financing, of the way in which money and sexual energy, because the seventh ray is connected to sex as well, insofar as the sacral center is connected to sex, but also it's connected to financing. And you might think, how are they related? But they are connected. And we see this even in the most concretized way with, let's say, prostitution, a Libran theme, like of the sort of concretization of relationship where the love principle isn't there. Remember, Libra has this weighing of the opposites, and Uranus, seventh ray planet, is the esoteric ruler of this. And so the law of love, so to speak, in its most densely inverted form, you have this prostitution thing where it's sex and money, sex and money, sex and money. I'm going to give you the money, you give me the sex. But it's this, there's a theme here of the Eros, principle of Eros, and the way in which this moves. But you may have heard this. People say money is a magnifier. Or when people say power corrupts. Does power corrupt though? Or is it more so the case that power, or Eros, as a massive energetic force of magnetism, of creational life energy, when you pour it through someone's system, if there are any little contracted whatever, shadows, all of these sorts of things, then it will magnify that. So, okay, so this is also why spiritual people can have a hard time with this subject matter, because it's reasonable to be scared of the responsibility that comes with having to work with more forms of energy. I kind of got ahead of myself there. Sex and money, coming back to this connection. What is sexual energy? Is this deep movement of Eros, of vitality, of the sacral energy. In a child, which they aren't sexually mature, but in a child it expresses as the dynamic urge towards play. We think about fifth house and Leo and exoteric sun rules the lower three centers of the body. There's the sacral center there, the games at the fifth house and play, and also romance, all of these sorts of things. So Eros is this big abundant life force, and money is part of that flow. And what does money do in its best sense? Let's say you get $10 million right now. Freedom. Freedom to get on a plane and go there at the drop of a hat, to get help with this. You could get someone else to do that service for you. Freedom. That is a seventh ray motif. Remember, spirit, matter, dynamic magic, manifestation. Uranus, hierarchical ruler of Aries, right, where the will of God is. So spiritual people can sometimes be they can be open in the heart, but then they contract around which center? The sacral center. Yeah, it can be a problem. So, okay, we talked about Jupiter in Cancer, and Cancer, it can be this, it's good transit for real estate and things, investing in property, the expansion of a lot of these Cancerian themes of materiality. And third and seventh ray, feminine processes, materiality, substance, what's needed. There's a connection here with financing and the sacral energy. I guess what I want to invite for in this exploration today through this video is just in the same way that we expand through the heart center. And what does that entail? It entails going beyond the individual life, thinking about the universal. This is Neptune here, elevating solar plexus to heart center, thinking about the universal need of humanity. That's Neptune through Cancer, esoteric ruler. And then Jupiter, second ray, ruling the heart center, esoteric ruler of Aquarius, the water bearer. I want to serve my fellow man, my brothers and sisters. I want to leave something behind that isn't just a legacy, or rather than being simply a legacy of it's like the Leo polarity there, my progeny and my son, the king, and like the sons to adopt the monastic inheritance or whatever. It's the legacy of one's love towards brotherhood or universal human family there, wanting to leave something behind that actually makes a lasting difference for the better of humanity, whether or not you get credit for it or not. Yeah. So expansion through the heart center. That's where I was going with that. Expanding through the heart, going beyond the personal connections and my personal life. Following the heart center, following the love principle no matter what. That's the great crucifixion that happens, that big mystical awakening of consciousness, or where people experience the Holy Spirit and all of this. Then it's about, I reorient my actions towards the love principle. The sacral center is another place that we need to expand through. Unfortunately, in a lot of the neo-spiritual realms, this looks like often an exaggeration or an expansion of the sexual energy as the untamed libido. People don't necessarily like that word. They want to go, I want to embrace my Eros, I don't want to tame it. But there is a need to bring this energy into alignment with the love principle. It's part of the whole process. It's not an anti-sex message, by the way, of course. It is rather a seeing that the fundamental libido, the fundamental life energy of the sacral center is, just with that description of the children playing, it is a vital energy of manifestation, of energized activity. So we want to bring that into alignment with the love principle there, or with the spiritual will. And that's a difficult process, and it involves all kinds of different bits and pieces, which we won't go into because it can go off in a myriad of different directions depending on the kind of person and the difficult individual challenges, etc. But we want to be able to open up the money that we invest in, or open up that sacral center as the releasing of the fear of scarcity. This is the big, we can come up against that in the heart center as well, but usually it's more of a loss of control of the life, because when we follow love, there's a fundamental reorientation from selfishness to selflessness and the responsibility that we have towards following love. When it comes to the sacral center, it's a little bit more instinctive, and it's a liberating of the deeper levels of body identification, where it's like, I want to hold on to this so I don't run out of resources. Scarcity. And this scarcity thing is a bit of a third ray trap. And in a broader level, the third ray does have a connection to the sacral center as well. Seventh and third ray. So there's often this scarcity thing that happens with the money, with the vital energy in that way. So we want to think about liberating that sacral center. My husband went through a phase, he's a very seventh ray kind of person. He went through a phase, it was actually a heart awakening, but one thing that he was doing to really exaggerate or help open the floodgates, so to speak, of his own heart nature was he donated all this money. He was barely making anything back then. But I really love this person, what they're doing. Here's $500. And here's this. And in my last video of Jupiter in Cancer, I did talk about Buckminster Fuller, who I've mentioned plenty of times on this channel. But he really understood how the universal intelligence of the resources, these Cancerian processes of nourishment and intelligence really work. And he had this rule that he lived by, where he, at the point where he was making all kinds of money from all these different things, at the end of every month, he would take from all of the earnings just what he needed and his immediate family. So whatever those needs are, I need to fix the house there or get enough food, but buy the groceries, or whatever was needed. What's needed, not necessarily wanted from the place of identification. So this is the deeper level of Cancer. What's needed, and then all of the other profit back into this project, back into that group, donate it there. So just inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Big breath of consciousness through this dense realm of money and financing. And he said something to the effect of, the universe will always help you out just in the nick of time. So you think, oh, I couldn't possibly, it could show up as, I couldn't possibly spend money there because I'm not gonna, have enough to do X. But if you're doing it in alignment with consciousness, what you do find is that to those who give all is given. All is given. That really becomes experienced. But we really get pushed up against these certain edges. Where are we limited in where we can spend our money? And sometimes people actually will have the money technically, but they still hoard it. It's a pathology here. It's a limited fear-based consciousness, and most people have this. It's a very deep thing, and it can show up in different ways. This is another simple example, fun example. When I met my husband, something that he was good at in terms of investing in was books. He loved books. He'd happily spend multiple hundreds of dollars in a book buying session, just get all the books. So he had natural flow there. It was in an enjoyment for him. It was a natural thing that he could have this effortless reciprocity with in the process of, I'm giving all this money and I'm receiving all this enjoyment from buying the books. He couldn't do that with his own wardrobe. And that's what I invited him to do. Because when we met, that was not good what was going on with the wardrobe. He didn't know how to dress himself at that stage. He'd gone through a big change in his body. Everything was not fitting well. And he didn't look comfortable in the clothes he was wearing. He was kind of hiding. It just wasn't flattering. So this is like way back in the early days. So I took him shopping. I was like, I'm going to get you some things that you're going to look cool in. They're going to actually fit you and really bring out a side of your personality that you haven't been able to access yet. And it was really difficult for him to do this. And we got this really swish brown leather jacket, fit him nice, round neck. And he actually broke down. He had to sit down in the shop and just let it out. It was really difficult, him seeing himself in that way. So there's a few different things going on in his personal chart and his personal challenges that make that a particular made that in the past not a problem now, but did make that a particular challenge for him. But what I'm talking about here is finding where that edge is of where you're willing to extend life into. especially like something like wardrobe or clothing or things that feel good on the body and make the body, coming back to Cancerian stuff again with, I mean, fashion's kind of a Leo thing. And there is a connection there with this exoteric sun ruling the sacral center a bit in terms of its affiliation and with the earth. But Cancer as well in terms of the, like what's nourishing for the form and for the personality and what helps the personality feel strong and enriched. And yes, that can be things like food, but also, yeah, like dressing well. Some of these things that we typically have associated with as being shallow or superficial or materialistic. And of course they can be, but they can also be deeply creative, inspiring processes of individuation. Having a good wardrobe where everything you pull out looks good and it's in your color palette and it really helps you feel put together, that's that ritualistic process. Again, so with this example with my husband, it was really difficult for him to say yes to spending a few $100s on a couple of items here, there and everywhere, even though he could spend that same amount of money on books. So this is what I'm just kind of moistening the palette, so to speak, for your own investigation and reflection on where are these areas that we contract around. Especially in a realm that seventh ray isn't inherently feminine, but relative to our current context, it is kind of feminine because it has to do with coming into the sacral center a lot and the instinctual energies and bringing together aspects of the animal body that have been hitherto sort of banished or lost in favor of our concretization or our emphasis on the logoic principle. So it's an invitation to come back into these slightly more feminine processes, let's say, and accessing the magic there. And that's part of opening up down in this area. I had something similar. It wasn't with wardrobe, but it was... Actually, I think there was an element of it with wardrobe for a while. It's interesting. It seems so like, oh, it's just clothing. But it's something that you put on the body. And okay, here's the thing. It's about enjoyment as a principle. And the limits we have around enjoyment. This is part of the feminine rejection too, is the radiance. It's like if we feel good and look good and we take up space, then that takes us to the edges of all of our difficulty in doing that. Like, oh, I'm going to be attacked. Women carry this a little bit more than men, but men can have it too. I can't be radiant because then I'll get abused or attacked, or you can't do that. If you've had... The negative father problem can be that which shuts down the feminine too, or that radiance. You see it sometimes, unfortunately, in relationships where, let's say, the husband will not want the wife to look beautiful so that other men don't get attracted to them or something. So there's a kind of, that's the limited patriarchal thing where there's this clenching around the Eros. Not as just sex though, it's radiance, it's expression of life energy. So we're still keeping it in this local context, let's say with this example of wardrobe or something. But it's all of this energy of expanding out this way, taking up space, letting it go into enjoyment. And again, the push-pull that spiritual people have is, on the one hand, when we're waking up to consciousness, there can be a leaving of materiality. And where there was maybe a kind of disappearing into enjoyment from a disassociative place or from a materialistic place, then it's problematic. Then you have addictions or the shopaholic, or Virgo as the mother principle veiling the Christ child in its lesser sense. It's about matter and materiality, or Capricorn climbing a mountain of personal ambition and all of this. But when we're working with the soul, and especially not just disciples mounting the fixed cross, but coming into the Aquarian age, which brings this seventh ray emphasis, we're going to be having to come back down into matter in all of these different ways. And that is part of occupying the body, doing things that do feel like that expand the enjoyment. This can allow for, just as we expand the heart, but expand that sacral energy of enjoyment, of moving the deeper levels of Eros, and that can be money as well. And these are very seventh ray teachings. You hear stories of businessmen who became very wealthy, very, very wealthy people, but when they were first starting out, who was an example? Like Donald Trump gave an example of someone that he knew who, before he could afford it, he would buy first class airline tickets. And you think that's stupid. That the practical message of like anyone with common sense with finance would be like, you don't spend more than what you have. But he was doing it consciously as this way to stretch himself into that new level that he wanted to go to. And this is kind of a manifestation method and technique, and it just depends on where you're coming from in consciousness. But of course, the guy did end up becoming a wealthy businessman. But it's that like stretching into materiality and enjoyment, and the seventh ray again, a ray of finance. It's the Eden ray. It's about bringing the divine into manifestation and expression. Expression is a key word for the seventh ray. And so the Garden of Eden as a theme, or having everything that we need, and we can actually be in the enjoyment of matter in a way where it's not materialistic and selfish, but everyone in some way, shape or form, when coming down into these lessons of to do with the sacral center, to do with the expansion of one's enjoyment, of Eros, of the financing and investment, and this deeper part of material energy. I mean, it is spiritual fundamentally, but it's the lower end of the spiritual energy where it's more dense. Everyone is going to have some contraction around here, and it's the fear of that power, the fear of getting attacked for expressing the power, the fear for the power taking over. It's part of that scorpionic lesson, right? Of having to go down into the subplanes of the astral. Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, lest we forget. So it's part of, yes, we go up and out. This is the sixth ray age of mysticism, and nothing of this material world matters, only God matters. Yes, that is true. But then once we have that revelation, okay, well, now what do? We got to incarnate, and then we have to go back down into this. And so we come up against all sorts of different aspects of our being with this sacral thing. And it does translate, by the way, to occupying your sacral, like lower belly part. For women, there's a lot to do with the uterus there. And it's the gonads, so the ovaries. I've spoken about this before in my videos on sex, sexuality, sex teachings as part of the seventh ray problem or investigation. And the testes for men. And are coming into that surrender into matter. But it's one of those things where you have to, before you can lose control, let's say, back into the feminine realm of all of this magnetic power of substance, you have to actually it's like you have to learn how to get control, consciousness, purity of heart, love, right? Honesty, all of the spiritual virtues. So you get that first, and that's like the exiting of Pisces off the mutable cross, right? That's the first death. So it's like a leaving of materiality. And then you get all of these qualities, the virtues, so to speak, and then you have to, okay, now we've got control. It's sort of like, you don't let a kid go free rein in the candy shop, right? But you can let an adult go. Well, some adults, but you get what I'm saying. It's that, there's a certain restriction of these forces until you have the maturity of consciousness to be able to handle it. And then we have to step back though. And this is where the Christian theme is sort of capped. And that's partly because it encapsulates the Piscean death out of the mutable cross, which is the end of materiality. And yet we have to deal with the problem of matter. This is why the Jungians had this emphasis on the alchemy. Alchemy being a very scorpionic, like the arcane substance of transformation. It's no surprise there that we see all these so-called coincidental, not really, but coincidental connections between alchemy and the integration of the opposites, fourth ray in Scorpio, the arcane substance of the sting of the scorpion as that which transforms, and then Uranus is exalted in the sign of Scorpio when that battle has been won. So that is to say, we have to be able to get down into matter. And where we see the sexual abuse thing, for instance, where you see the priests that end up, like, this is exactly why, because they're not occupying the lower centers. And anything that you do not occupy, something else does. Something else does. So you have to occupy that space. But when we come down there, you can sure as shit bet that there's going to be issues down there. So you have to be willing to have the maturity of the love to stay with. This is equal to your masculine heart or masculine consciousness being able to stay put with your own matter, staying with the grief, staying with the fear, not identifying with it and then spinning narratives from it. That's the unconscious reactivity. It's like, okay, all of this is fundamentally illusory. Oh, I'm having this deep fear come up of being seen if I'm to like express myself. So we're all going to come up against different things like that. You have to be willing to be there. Rage, aggression, fear, terror, shame. Shame's a big one. A lot of that's held within that sacral center. And what chakra does the sacral center have main connection with? Throat center, which is the center of what? Expression and manifestation. So we've got to go down here if we're going to be able to come here and get out there. True voice, true expression, true ability to concretize that. Yeah. So I've gone off in a lot of different directions as usual because I'm a Gemini tangent queen, okay? But following from Jupiter in Cancer, keep this in your awareness. Sacral center emphasis, getting down into your own sacral, getting down into your own ground. Men, dropping into your balls. And a lot of men start to meet the difficulty around their own phallic power. Women, their own receptivity, their own, a lot of that feminine power that's been, for both men and women, yes, for men it's like the phallic thing, but it's all of these instinctual energies that come out of the body, and in the way that they come out of the body, they're of matter and they're of the mother, and so they're of the feminine, which has been expressed, all of this. So these are places that we have to go. Get the maturity of your heart, orientation towards truth, love, become reliable in terms of your spiritual virtues, and then we go down. And by the way, you can't really make that process happen, but I will say that it does unfurl for you when your consciousness is mature enough, but you also have to be aware enough to be looking out, okay? But these are the places where we're going to have really big revelations, really big quickenings of transformation, because the 7th ray in Uranus is a very fast, it's spirit into matter. That's the magic right there. And so we have to get down into these areas and meet the muck and deal with our Eros problems, deal with our money problems, and start to open up our contractions around these areas. Okay, this is going to free up expression, free up vital energy, and free up our ability to step out of, let's say, as metaphysician, spiritual, mystic types, which won't be everyone, but most of you, given the nature of what we talk about on this channel, right? Get out of just the mystical or the mental, esoteric, the jargon and the patterns and all of this. It has to be getting down into this space where we can start to really work with substance, and we have to get into the depths with that, get into the mud, so to speak. Okay, I think that's enough for today. But yeah, money, Eros, 7th ray, all of this is part of the epoch of moving into the Aquarian age, and a really great time to percolate on some of these themes with Jupiter going into Cancer, because we just talked about a lot of Cancerian, watery 7th ray themes there, okay? And as well as some of the, we're talking about ancestry with Jupiter in Cancer. A lot of the ancestral stuff that we carry, it's sitting down there. This is where the deep wiring exists. It's down there in the sacral center, in the base, okay? These are where we have to go down and get to and through. Okay, all right, that's all, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment. I'm happy to chat with you in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.